I was thinking the other day, we spend so much of our lives trying to write our own stories. We hold the pen, we plan the plot, we try to control the characters, and then we wonder why the ending doesn't look like what we prayed for. But here's what I've learned: when you let God be the author, He writes stories you never could have imagined. Stories that don't always start how you expect, but end exactly how you need. Some of you are in chapter 1, and it feels lonely. Some of you are in chapter 5, and it feels confusing. Some of you are waiting for that person, that moment, that breakthrough, and you're wondering, God, did you forget my page? But I came to tell you God doesn't skip chapters. Every heartbreak, every delay, every unanswered prayer, it's still part of the story He's writing. And when God writes your love story, it's not just about who you fall in love with, it's about who's been loving you all along. So today, I want to show you what it looks like when God holds the pen. One of the hardest things to accept in life is that God's timing rarely matches our own. We live in a world that runs on deadlines, on schedules, on countdowns. We want everything fast answers, fast relationships, fast breakthroughs. We think if it doesn't happen when we want it, then maybe it's not going to happen at all. But what if what feels like a delay is actually divine preparation? What if the thing you're frustrated about right now is the very thing God is using to form something deeper inside of you? Because I've learned that when God takes His time, He's not punishing you, He's positioning you. He's not holding you back. He's setting you up for something greater than what you were even asking for. There are moments when you pray for something, and it doesn't show up on your timeline. You start wondering, God, did you hear me? Did I do something wrong? Why am I still waiting? And that's when the enemy loves to whisper, see, God forgot about you. He's blessing everyone else but you. But that's not true. God's silence is not His absence. Sometimes His delay is His way of making sure the foundation is strong enough to carry what you've been asking for. Because if He gave it to you too soon, it might crush you instead of complete you. He's the kind of God who will withhold something good now to make room for something better later. Think about it. If God had answered every prayer when you wanted Him to, some of those prayers would have destroyed you. You were asking for people who weren't meant to stay, for doors that would have led you away from your purpose, for things that looked right but weren't rooted right. But God, in His wisdom, said, not yet. Not because He's cruel, but because He cares too much to give you something that isn't aligned with your destiny. His wait is not a punishment, it's a protection. His not now doesn't mean not ever. It means I'm still writing, and the best part of your story isn't ready to be revealed yet. When God's timing seems slow, remember this: He's outside of time. He doesn't rush like we do because He already knows how every chapter connects. You're looking at one page, but He's seen the whole book. And when you finally reach the moment He's been preparing you for, you'll look back and realize that every delay was actually direction. Every detour was divine. You'll thank Him for the prayers He didn't answer, because you'll see how His plan was always better than yours. So if you're waiting right now, don't lose heart. Don't let impatience convince you that God has forgotten. The pause in your story isn't wasted, it's sacred. God's timing is not a delay. It's a design. He's aligning people, preparing places, maturing your heart, and setting the stage for a love story that only He could write. You might not see it yet, but trust me, when the page finally turns, it's going to make perfect sense. Before God brings the right person into your life, He often begins by building the right version of you. We spend so much time asking God for the right relationship, but we rarely stop to ask if we're the right person for the thing we're praying for. We want someone kind, consistent, mature, faithful, patient, but are we becoming that ourselves? Sometimes the waiting season isn't about God withholding something from you. It's about God working something in you. Because if He gave you the blessing before you were ready to handle it, that blessing could easily become a burden. There are moments when you think God is being slow, when it feels like everyone else is finding love, and you're still stuck in the same spot. But what if this isn't a setback? What if this is sacred preparation? God doesn't just send you someone to complete you. He grows you so you can complement the person he's sending. He's not interested in building a relationship that looks good on Instagram, but falls apart in reality. He wants to build something that can last through storms, something that's rooted in character, not chemistry. And that means sometimes he'll hold back the person you've been praying for until you've become the person he's been shaping you to be. Maybe that's why certain relationships didn't work out. It's not because you weren't good enough, it's because God was still developing the strength, the patience, and the faith that would allow you to love the right way when the right person arrives. God's process often feels painful because he's pruning things that can't come with you into the next season. Pride, insecurity, fear, comparison, those things can't survive in a God-written love story. So he takes you through seasons that stretch you, test you, and transform you. It's not punishment, it's preparation. When you let God build you first, he builds your heart with his blueprint. You start realizing that your worth isn't defined by someone else's attention, but by his affection. You stop chasing validation and start walking in purpose. That's when you become dangerous to the enemy, because a person who knows who they are in Christ can't be manipulated by temporary feelings. They love from overflow, not from emptiness, and that kind of love, that's the kind that can sustain a kingdom relationship. You see, God doesn't just want to give you someone who looks right. He wants to give you someone who fits right spiritually, emotionally, and purposefully. But that fit can only happen when you're formed. So while you're praying for your future spouse, let God keep working on you. Let him heal what's broken, restore what's lost, and strengthen what's weak. Because when he finally brings that person into your life, you won't be meeting them from a place of need. You'll be meeting them from a place of wholeness. And when two whole people come together under God's timing, that's not just love, that's ministry. Rejection has a way of cutting deep. It makes you question your worth, your value, your place in someone's story. You start replaying the moments, wondering what you could have said differently, what you could have done better. But what if rejection isn't meant to ruin you? What if it's meant to redirect you? What if that closed door wasn't a sign that God was against you, but proof that he was protecting you from something that couldn't sustain you? We call it rejection, but in heaven's vocabulary, it's often called redirection. There are times when you pray for something or someone, and it doesn't go the way you hoped. You thought that job was your breakthrough. You thought that relationship was your forever. You thought that opportunity was the one you were waiting for. And then, suddenly, it falls apart. It hurts because you built your expectations around it. You imagined a future with it. But God's no is sometimes the most loving answer he could ever give, because he sees what you can't see. He knows what's on the other side of that door, and sometimes the thing you're begging him to open is the very thing he's trying to save you from. When God redirects you, he's not denying your destiny, he's protecting it. You may feel like you lost something, but what if you were actually rescued? Sometimes we get so attached to what looks right that we ignore the red flags God's been showing us. We hold on to comfort when God is calling us to growth. And so, in his mercy, he lets things fall apart not to break you, but to break you free. Because if you stayed where you weren't meant to be, you'd miss where you were meant to go. Rejection has a way of removing distractions that could delay your destiny. Think about Joseph in the Bible. His brothers rejected him, sold him, betrayed him, but what they meant for harm, God used for good. That rejection led him straight into the position God had prepared for him all along. The pit was just a passageway to the palace, and that's true for you too. The places you've been rejected are often the places that push you into purpose. You just have to trust that God's hand is still on your story, even when his plan doesn't match your preference. Every no from man makes more room for a yes from God. The people who walked away weren't meant to carry the next chapter of your story. The opportunities that passed you by weren't big enough to hold what God is about to release. Rejection isn't evidence that you failed. It's evidence that God has something different and often better in mind. So instead of asking, why did they leave? Maybe start asking, Lord, what are you leading me toward? Because when you finally arrive at what he's been preparing, you'll realize that rejection didn't derail you, it directed you exactly where you needed to be. Love isn't something you just stumble upon, it's something that's formed through faithfulness. We live in a world that tells us love is all about sparks, chemistry, and instant connection. But real love, the kind that lasts, doesn't grow in convenience, it grows in consistency. It's easy to fall in love when everything feels right, but it's faithfulness that keeps love standing when everything feels wrong. God doesn't just want you to find love, He wants you to build it, brick by brick, through patience, grace, and daily commitment. Because the love that God writes isn't a fairy tale, it's a foundation. There are people who pray for a lifelong relationship, but want it to feel effortless from day one. Yet God uses relationships to refine you, not to simply entertain you. He uses them to teach you how to forgive, how to sacrifice, how to serve. True love isn't built in the highlight moments. It's formed in the hidden ones, the quiet decisions to stay kind, to stay honest, to stay rooted even when emotions fade. Feelings are fragile, but faithfulness is firm, and that's what makes love endure the test of time. When you look at the way God loves, you see what real faithfulness looks like. He doesn't love you because you always get it right. He doesn't love you because you never fail. He loves you because that's who He is, steady, constant, unwavering. And when God writes your love story, He teaches you to love the same way, to love not just when it's easy, but when it's costly. To love not just when you're being filled, but when you're being poured out. Because love that only lasts in comfort isn't love at convenience. Faithfulness forms love by teaching you to show up when it's inconvenient, to pray when you'd rather give up, to speak life when frustration fills your heart. Every act of patience, every word of forgiveness, every moment you choose to stay instead of walk away, it's forming something deeper, something divine. You start to realize that love isn't about perfection, it's about presence. It's not about finding someone who never fails, but finding someone who chooses you again and again, even when failure shows up. That's the kind of love that mirrors the heart of God. When God writes your love story, He doesn't rush it, because He knows that anything formed fast usually fades fast. He takes time shaping your heart to reflect His, teaching you that love isn't about butterflies, it's about building. And when two people commit to being faithful to God and to each other, through the ups and downs, through the joy and the tension, through the blessings and the battles, that's where love becomes unshakable. Because the strongest relationships aren't the ones that never struggle. They're the ones that stay faithful through the struggle. A love formed through faithfulness doesn't just survive seasons. It thrives through them, growing stronger with every storm it endures. The author knows the ending before you even start the chapter. That's what makes walking with God so powerful and so mysterious at the same time. We see moments, He sees the masterpiece. We read one page at a time, but He's already written the whole story. And yet, we still get anxious when the plot doesn't unfold the way we imagined. We think, God, this isn't how it was supposed to go. This isn't how I pictured my life, my love story, my future. But God is never surprised by your detours. The turns that shock you are the very ones He already factored into His design. He knew exactly where you'd stumble, where you'd question, where you'd grow, and He wrote grace into every line of it. When you truly understand that God is the author, you stop trying to wrestle the pen out of His hands. You stop panicking when the story doesn't make sense, because you realize He's not done writing yet. Some of the most beautiful chapters in your life won't make sense until you see how they connect to the ending He's already written. The heartbreaks, the delays, the disappointments, they all serve a purpose. He weaves redemption into every rough draft. He doesn't waste a single sentence. Even the parts you wish you could erase are often the same parts He uses to bring you into your destiny. Maybe you're in a chapter right now that feels confusing. You can't see how it's going to end. You're trying to figure out why certain people left, why certain doors closed, why the plan changed. But what if the author is setting up something you can't see yet? Every great story has tension. Every great plot has conflict. It's what gives meaning to the resolution. Without the struggle, the victory wouldn't feel so sweet. Without the heartbreak, the healing wouldn't carry so much power. God writes stories that are layered with lessons, and sometimes He'll let you walk through something difficult so He can show you His faithfulness in a deeper way. The beauty of God being the author is that He doesn't just write for you, He writes with you. He gives you free will, but He works through every choice, every misstep, every moment of surrender to fulfill His greater plan. What the enemy meant to use as an ending, God transforms into a beginning. What looked like a period was only a comma. The story isn't over until God says it's over, and when He writes the ending, it's always filled with redemption, restoration, and purpose. So when you can't see the whole picture, trust the one who painted it. When you can't understand the current chapter, believe that the author is still good. He knows how every line connects, how every detail matters, how every tear has meaning. You may not know how it ends, but you can trust who does. Because when God is the author, every page, even the painful ones, leads you closer to His promise. When God writes it, the story always points back to His glory. That's the thing about divine love stories. They're never just about two people finding each other. They're about two people finding God in the middle of it all. Every chapter, every high, every heartbreak, every miracle. It all exists to reveal His goodness, not just your happiness. We sometimes want the story to make us look fulfilled, but God wants it to make Him look faithful. Because when He writes it in such a way that no one can take credit but Him. The timing, the connection, the way everything aligns, it's all orchestrated to make you say, only God could have done this. When God is the author, your love story becomes a testimony, not just a timeline. It's not just how we met, or how we fell in love. It's how God healed me before I met you, how He taught me patience while I was waiting, how He showed up when I almost gave up. It becomes a story that reflects His hand in every detail. Because the truth is, God doesn't just want to bless you with love. He wants to use your love to bless others. The way you forgive, the way you stay faithful, the way you honor each other. It becomes a living sermon that points people to the author. We often think the goal of a love story is to find the right person. But in God's version, the goal is to reflect the right person, Jesus. When two people love each other the way Christ loves the church, something supernatural happens. Their love becomes a mirror that reflects grace, mercy, sacrifice, and unity. People see the way you love and realize that love like that doesn't come from human effort. It comes from divine influence. That's why God doesn't just write cute stories. He writes calling, filled ones. He builds marriages and relationships that carry kingdom purpose. Sometimes we get so focused on what we want the story to look like that we forget what the story is for. God's goal isn't to make us comfortable, it's to make us conduits of His character. The more He writes your story, the more He reveals Himself through it. That's why He'll allow certain challenges to shape you, certain seasons to humble you, and certain miracles to surprise you. So that in the end, when people look at your life, they don't see luck. They see the Lord. They see His fingerprints all over your journey. When God writes your love story, it doesn't just satisfy your heart. It glorifies His name. The joy you feel becomes worship. The unity you build becomes witness. The commitment you keep becomes a reflection of His covenant. And when people ask, how did you two make it through everything? Your answer won't point to your strength, it'll point to His grace. Because that's the beauty of a God-written story. It never ends with applause for the characters. It ends with glory for the author.